Well, I am thrilled to death to be here. I appreciate the invitation to be here. I appreciate the organizers of this event. It's a great event, a great facility that's here to be used for these purposes, and I appreciate all of the attendance. It's great to see a good number of people on a weekend like this that want to get together and study and look at serving Christ better and more effectively. And so I've appreciated the talks thus far from both Brother David and Brother Craig. We were talking about these topics a little bit in preparation, and I think the division of these topics was great in the sense of not a ton of overlap, but obviously there is some overlap in all these things. And so as we go throughout this topic of looking at family, I also want us to recognize the principles David taught about Bible study, the principles Craig taught about service. Those are things that we have to incorporate into our family dynamic and our training of our family. And so that's what we want to focus on today in this topic, is looking at answering those three questions that were presented. What is our personal responsibility within our families in living out a God-designed family? And then how can we use our family in ways that benefits the church? And how can we ultimately then try to help others to grow and develop their families as well? So I want you to think about this afternoon as we begin. What is your family's purpose? You know, every family has one. Every family has something that they are about, something they're focused on, something that even the kids understand. This is the priority in our household. You know, I think about Joshua, and Joshua was given a task in Joshua chapter 1 after Moses died of leading the children of Israel into the promised land, a task that, remember, Moses had been unable to fulfill, and so these are big shoes that he is trying to fill, and over several years and a lot of battles, the Israelites go through and they conquer that land. Well, Joshua made a statement in Joshua 24, verse 15, as an old man. You all know this verse. Most of you do. Many of you probably have it hanging in your house somewhere, but in Joshua 24, verse 15, Joshua is standing before the Israelites, and he says this: "If it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And I've always read this passage as Joshua essentially saying, as we always have, as we do, and as we always will. Joshua is making a proclamation that this is what me and my family are about. It's what we've been about, it's what we are, and what we always will be about. And that's the same proclamation that I want each of us, hopefully we already have in our families, made this proclamation that as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So I ask you again, what is your family's purpose? You know, we think about different options, sometimes different things that different families focus on. One of those is financial and material blessings. Many families are focused on temporal and worldly success and financial success, and that becomes the driving force of who they are as a family, and that's how the kids are trained, and they're trained on what to focus on: achieving financial security, the highest standard of living possible, having the biggest house and the most possessions. And at the end of the day, that type of focus is not going to produce humble, God-fearing adults. Most likely it's going to bring about kids that turn into adults that are also focused on physical wealth and temporal things. You know, we see sometimes families focus being on children's success and achievement, and that being the most important thing in a family dynamic. I want my kids to succeed. I have 4 children. I want them all to succeed. I want them to be able to do good at sports if they're playing, and work hard and learn good principles of bettering yourself and working hard to achieve a goal, and all those things are wonderful things, but at the end of the day, that can't be the sole focus of what we're about as a family. If it is, we're raising kids, they're going to idolize sports or idolize even academic achievement above the things of God. You know, some families are focused on entertainment and activities and trips and vacations and experiences, and all those things are wonderful. I love a vacation with my family just as much as the next person does, but again, if that's what we're teaching and training our kids, if we're saying essentially as a family our purpose is to go live it up and entertain ourselves, we're focused on the wrong things. You know, we have some families that are focused on projecting the perfect image, and that becomes the focus. Even though there's chaos in the home, well, we're never going to let anybody else see that chaos. We're going to take the perfect selfie, or the whatever you call a selfie that's with multiple people, but we're going to take the perfect pictures, we're going to post those on social media, and we're going to put this image in front of everybody about how we are the perfect family, and that becomes the focus, and that's a pride-filled focus as a family. That cannot be what we are about. You know, for some families, the focus seems to be just everybody go your own way, do your own thing. We see everybody on their own screen, focused on their own entertainment, focused on their own projects, and we're not cohesive at all, not a family with a purpose that we're working together on. And then finally, our last example here is sometimes we see families that just absolutely have no focus or purpose whatsoever. Everything is just chaos, and nobody knows what the family is supposed to be about. What is the purpose of the Christian family? Well, Joshua stated it in Joshua 24:15. In his version of that, we will serve the Lord. I want to look at a New Testament example of a family that was God or kingdom focused, and that's the household of Stephanus. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, 15 and 16. This is Paul writing to the church at Corinth. He says, I urge you, brethren, you know the household of Stephanus, that it is the first fruits of Achaia, and that they have devoted themselves to the ministry of the saints, that you also submit to such and to everyone who works and labors with us. I want to notice a couple of things. First of all, he doesn't just say Stephanus was devoted to the ministry of the saints. He said the household of Stephanus, meaning Stephanus's family was just as devoted. They were all working together as a household. They knew what their purpose was, and their purpose was to serve the church, to minister to the saints, to strengthen the kingdom of God. And it's the same thing that Joshua said many, many years before. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's the proclamation that Stephanus is making by saying, me and my household are going to be addicted to the ministry of the saints. We're going to give everything that we have. In other words, our priority is going to be the church and God. And that's what we, each of us in our families, need to strive for. A kingdom-focused family is a strong, spiritually mature family. You know, the theme of the weekend is growing together in Him, maturity in unity. And we need to see mature families that are developed in the Scriptures, that know what their purpose is. And that's what we're trying to build. So let's tackle our first question, which is, what is our personal responsibility within the family? And I want to talk about what God's design for the family is. I know many of you sitting here, you're going to know all of this. It's not going to be new material, but I think it's important that we walk through it just as a baseline for what is God's design for that spiritually strong family. Well, first of all, a spiritually strong family. If you want to be a mature, developed spiritual family, you have to first set your foundation on Christ. There has to be unity within the family, founded upon the submission to Christ and His Word. Matthew 19 and verse 6, Jesus said, so then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. Jesus, of course, talking here about marriage. And notice what He says. He says that God has joined them together. What was two is now one. There is a unity that exists there. And folks, ultimately, if we want to see unity in the church, the first place that we have to work on that unity and developing that unity is in our homes. And that starts in our marriages. And husbands and wives need to become one flesh in all ways, as you think about that concept. That we're on the same page with goals, we're on the same page with focus, we're on the same page with church, we're on the same page with kids and discipline and all of those things, that we are united in submitting to Christ. And that's going to provide a foundation for a strong spiritual family. We look at some of the instructions to husbands and wives. Ephesians chapter 5 is a great place to go to look at some family passages and instruction there. We'll read just a couple of verses here. Starting at verse 23, Paul writes, for the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church, and He is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave Himself for her. What is our personal responsibility in the family? Well, if you're here and you are married, you are a husband or you are a wife, you have been given specific instruction from God for your home and for your family. And as a husband, God is calling you to lead the family, to step up. And too many times we see families, unfortunately, where the husband wants to abdicate that responsibility and doesn't want to be the one to have to step up and lead. And if you're a husband in the crowd this afternoon, I want to encourage you to lead. That's what God is calling you to do. If you're a wife in the crowd, God is asking you to help your husband, to submit to your husband in his leadership, to allow him to lead. Sometimes we see families where even though the husband might be trying to step up and lead, he's hindered by a wife that's not allowing him to. And the reality is submission is a choice that God is giving our wives. And I don't understand that in that sense because I'm not a woman, I'm not a wife, and so I recognize it's a man standing up here preaching that. I get that, but we all have to submit to someone. Ultimately, we all submit to God. And so we understand the concept of submission. And so I just encourage you, if you're a wife in the crowd tonight, to recognize that if your husband is stepping up and leading spiritually, your job is to be united with him in that, to be his partner in that, and to allow him to lead and submit to him in those things. When you do that, God is glorified. When you do that, it sets the stage for raising good, godly kids. When you do that, it sets the stage for your family being able to ultimately benefit the church and help others to develop into that. But if we don't get this part right, if we live in constant conflict and division with our spouse and we're not united with them and we don't have the same purpose and we're not fulfilling our roles, we can't do any of the rest of it. Instead, we're going to live out our lives being someone that the elders and teachers and those more spiritually mature people in our congregations are constantly having to get involved with to try to help. And sometimes we need that. Sometimes that's where we are. And we need to work through things. And we need to allow the church to come help us. But the goal ought to be to work through those things and build and grow and become united in marriage together. Fathers and mothers, if you're a parent today, you have kids, you've been given a big task and responsibility. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, it says, "You fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in training in the admonition of the Lord." Proverbs 1 verse 8 says, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother." We quote Ephesians 6 verse 4, and obviously we talk about the importance of fathers in that. Fathers are specifically mentioned. That doesn't mean mothers aren't important. There's verses like this that we just read in Proverbs that talk about the importance of both a father and mother. Fathers and mothers provide different things for their children. But ultimately, parents are called not to provoke their children to anger, not to create an environment in a home in such a way that's going to cause kids to, instead of seeing faith, and instead of seeing true Christian principles lived out and unity in marriage and all that, instead they see conflict, they see anger, they see a lack of forgiveness, and instead they see bitterness. And when they see those things, it can cause them to react with their own anger, with their own bitterness, and with their own decision to forsake the things that supposedly their parents are about, which is church and God and all that. When we don't act right as parents in our own home, it affects our children. And so we have a huge responsibility to train them and to bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. And if you're a young person in the crowd this afternoon, if you're a child, know that Ephesians 6, 1 through 3 is for you. Paul wrote, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you, and you may live long on the earth." The reality is, if you are still in your parents' household under their authority, your responsibility before God is to submit to them in the Lord. Now, if they're asking you to do something obviously unbiblical, ungodly, you're not being told by God to submit to that, but you are supposed to be submissive to your parents and to follow their lead. If you've got good, godly mother and father who are trying to do their best to raise you and to show you what's important in life, please listen to them. And that verse number 2 talks about honoring your father and mother. That word honor there means to make weighty. Now, I would not look at your mom and say, "Hey, you're weighty to me." That's probably a bad plan. But that word means weighty in the sense of you place a higher weight on what they have to say. So you may be hearing a lot of things from your friends. You may be hearing a lot of things from other people. What your parents are trying to train you in the Lord should be more weighty to you. It should be more important. You should listen and give honor to those things. What about other family situations? We recognize that this is the ideal family situation, right? Father, mother, husband, wife, kids in the home. This is what we see in Scripture as God's design for the family. But we recognize that we're humans. We're not perfect. And because we're humans, other things happen, decisions are made in life, and things change. And so we have situations sometimes where, first of all, in churches, we have single people that have never been married. In churches, we have people who are widows or widowers and have lost their spouse, and so no longer have that person beside them to walk through life with. We have people in our congregation situations. Okay, we've got a lot of different dynamics going on in our congregations. We understand that. So what do we do there? Well, I want us to know two things, first of all. First, the design of God for the family is still the same, regardless of our personal situation. And we need to be big enough to acknowledge that. So if we've been through a situation where it's not ideal, we no longer have our spouse with us, and maybe we're a single parent, we're raising kids, The ideal is still the same. It's God's standard, okay? But secondly, and just as importantly, I want you to know, that's where ultimately the church comes in. Because we talk about the church being the family of God, right? Matthew chapter 12, 49 and 50 is one of the reasons why. In this situation, Jesus was approached and his disciples said, hey, your mother and your brothers are outside and they want to talk to you. And he said, who are my mother and my brothers? I kind of feel bad for Mary and his brothers sometimes when I read this story, because they were just coming to try to see Jesus, and he's going, who's my mom? And then he looks out at the crowd and he goes, if you are doing the will of God, I guess I'll read it. Verse 49, it says, and he stretched out his hand toward his disciples and said, here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. Now, he was making a point, a very valuable point that matters for us, and that is that if you are in a situation in your family where it's not ideal, if you're a single parent trying to raise your kids to be godly, you don't have the help of a spouse, if you're a single person that's not married and has no kids, that doesn't make you any less valuable to the kingdom, but it does make the church as your family far more important in the sense of having, instead of blood family that you're there with all the time relying on working together, you've got to work into your local congregation and see the spiritual family of God as a great resource to help you. This is where elders and deacons and evangelists and teachers and those in leadership in congregations, strong, mature families, need to be looking out for situations where there's opportunity to help, to bring what is needed. But I want to encourage you, if you're in a non-ideal situation, keep getting up each and every day with that purpose in mind of, I am still going to be what God wants me to be. I'm still going to raise my kids to the best of my ability to be what God wants them to be. And at the end of the story, that's all we can control, is our own effort and our own decisions. And that's what God is asking us to do. But ultimately, Jesus said, if you do the will of God, you're my mother, my brother, my sister, you're my family. And so you and I, if we are members of the Lord's church, we are family. This afternoon, in this building today, all of us that are baptized into Christ are family. And we need to see each other that way. And so just as blood family should be an integral part of one's life and should provide those things that are needed to be trained in godliness and those sorts of attributes, in the absence of that, the spiritual family of God becomes extremely important. And so from both a leadership standpoint and a family situation, let's make sure that we're doing what needs to be done there. So why is it so important to follow God's design ultimately? We're going to go through these pretty quickly, but I just want to give you several practical ways that you can think about starting today to try to build that type of family that God has described. First of all, live with integrity. Okay, it should go without saying. Unfortunately, it can't go without saying. We need to say it. The quickest way to ruin your family, the quickest way to hurt the church, the quickest way to cause chaos is to not live out what you say you're living out. And as Christian people in our families, we have to first choose individually to be who God has called us to be. And at the end of the story, we can't control the actions or the decisions of our spouse and ultimately of our adult children or anybody else, but we can control us. And we can do our very best to live the kind of life that God has called us to. We can establish and reinforce our family's purpose. So in your family, if your kids don't know what you're about and what your priority is, you need to make it known to them, and you need to reinforce that over and over and over, that we are a family that, fill in the blank. Whatever it is, we're a family that serves the Lord. We're a family that puts the church first. We're a family that is going to be spiritual and not temporal. Whatever those things are, but reinforce that vision for your family so they know what your purpose is. I want to encourage you as families to prioritize worship and service and fellowship and all of those things. Be there at church when the doors are open. Be a part of the service opportunities that exist, as Brother Craig talked about. Be a part of fellowship opportunities. Integrate your family into the greater body of Christ. Seek that unity and that maturity together. It will help your kids. It will help you. It will help the church. So we're going to talk more about helping the church in just a moment. Don't depend on the church to biblically educate your kids. Now, Ephesians chapter 4 has been read, 11 and 12. The church is an important part of training and equipping. Obviously, that's the leadership's role, is to help equip every member. That's going to include families. But at the end of the day, I want you to know that you are responsible for training your children. The church is not. The church can be a resource. The church can help. The church should be a resource and help. But you are responsible for your own family and your own kids. There's a statistic here. Lifeway did a study, and they've done it periodically. And so this is a few years old from 2017. But they were looking at when kids reached the age of college, kids that had previously attended a Protestant church regularly for at least a year during high school leading up to those college years, how many of those kids stopped going to church versus continued going to church. And the number was 66%. Two-thirds of kids stopped going to church once they were out of their family's home, and it was up to them to decide. Two-thirds of the kids college age who were regularly going, stopped going to church. Now, I've got 4 kids, so the math doesn't exactly work out there, but that's 2 or 3 of my kids deciding at age 18 to 22, I'm done with this, and I'm walking out and I'm leaving, and I don't want to be a part of church anymore. And that's terrifying for me to think about that concept. And it should be terrifying for all of us as parents, and recognize that ultimately, to stop this, and the best way that we can keep this from happening, knowing that 18 to 22-year-olds that are off on their own and they're making their own decisions, they have the free will to do that, right? Recognizing that, but the best way to stop this is to make every day that you have them in your home a day that you can reinforce the spiritual principles of God and make known what your family purpose is. Train them. Pay attention to it. Don't let your kids be another statistic. We don't want that. We want all of our kids, 100%, to be faithful members of the church. I want to encourage you as families to commit to consistent family devotions and family prayer. Take some time. It can be 10 minutes each day. In the morning, it could be at dinner, it could be at night before bed. But sit down and read from the Scriptures. Sit down and have spiritual conversations with your kids. Pray together and teach your kids how to pray. Take opportunities from church and the prayer list and people that you know have needs, and then teach your kids how to pray for those people, how to care about others. Take time to do that. It will matter. Be real and vulnerable with each other in your family. Don't be fake. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't be somebody that says one thing and then acts another way. Do as I say, not as I do. That's not a good strategy in a family. We need to be real and authentic. And that also means that we need to, when we make mistakes, be willing to apologize and get down on our kids' level and say, I'm sorry. That was wrong of me to do, and I'm ashamed that I did that, and so I apologize, but I'm going to work hard to not do that again. And when you do that for your children and you model that, it helps them to know the right thing to do in those situations. Model other spiritual disciplines like love and grace and repentance and forgiveness. Ultimately, as you're reading the Scriptures and they're learning those things audibly, that's a wonderful thing, but they need to see it in action in you. The greatest impact you're going to have on your children is for you and your wife or you and your husband to be living those things out in front of them, to show each other grace and forgiveness, to show them grace. And I promise, if you don't have kids yet, if you do eventually have kids, there will be plenty of opportunities to model grace and forgiveness with your children. Children are wonderful, but there's a lot of training that has to take place when it comes to those things. So show them what true love looks like, because ultimately what you're doing is you're creating a little mini version of church. That's what you're doing in your home. You're creating a little mini version of church, and what they see there is going to teach them about the broader impact and implications of being a part of God's church. And so it really is the training ground, ultimately, for bringing good adults to God. And then finally, practice intentional communication. Take time. Know what your kids are thinking. Know what they're experiencing. Know what they're visiting with their friends about. Know what they're doing online. Be intentional about communicating with them and create an environment of trust that says all of us are going to truly seek to fulfill this purpose that we've stated as a family, right? We're going to be a spiritual family. We're going to put church first. And so we're going to constantly have intentional communication. You and your spouse need to be intentionally communicating and talking about goals and talking about what we're about and how we're going to serve the church and how we're doing all those things, and your kids need to know that as well. There's other things that we could talk about. Obviously, discipline is important, consistency in the home, your wife and yourself modeling those things. We've talked a little bit about that, but ultimately I want you to know that our home is a training ground for either bringing up people that are seeking a life of worldliness and selfishness, or bringing up people who are ready to take on a life of spirituality, of faith, and of selflessness. And that's what we want. We want to create homes that lead them ultimately to helping the church. And that's our next point this afternoon, is ultimately we want to look at how does a strong family contribute to the church. And there's several ways that we can do that. Number one, a dedication to being present. Hebrews 10:24 and 25, you know the passage. It says, let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. One of the greatest impacts that a strong, spiritually mature family can have for eldership and for leadership in a congregation is that they can be relied on and counted on to always be present, to be there, to be a part, to be participating. And so I want to encourage you as you think about how can my family positively impact to the church, is first and foremost just be there. Don't put other things above it. Don't be at the ball game instead of being at church. My kids play some sports too. My boys are in baseball right now. Love that. Love watching them play. There's other extracurricular activities we talked about that kids are involved in, but at the end of the story, we have to make it known to them that there is something more important than all those things. And so when the church is having something that's important to be a part of, be there. Make that a dedicated goal, and your elders will love you and will thank you for that. Number two, doctrinally strong members. Strong families bring doctrinally strong members into the church. This is important for several reasons. Hebrews chapter 5, 13 and 14 says, for everyone who partakes only of milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness. For he is a babe, but solid food belongs to those who are full age. That is, those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. What we want in every Christian in every church is maturity. That's what we're going for. We want to have our senses exercised to be able to discern good and evil, and that happens through reason of use, through practice, through exercising those senses, through learning how to do that. And for a lot of us, especially those that are being raised in the church, the first and primary place where those senses need to be exercised is the home. And parents, you need to be teaching your kids how to differentiate between right and wrong, how to discern those things, how to learn how to make good, wise decisions. And when you do that, then you've got a spiritually mature, strong family that is a part of a congregation that can step in and say to the elders, what do you need? We're here. We'll help with anything that we need to. You have a false teacher that comes in the congregation that starts preaching wrong things. Then they're not sweeping away all the families of the congregation. The elders are having to play catch up to try to fix all it, because you've got spiritually mature families that recognize those things before the elders even have to say anything. And they go, hey, that's not right. We don't need to be spreading that. Or you have other divisive problems, people that get into a congregation that want to cause problems and issues. And spiritually strong families are going to be able to say, hey, that's not okay. That's not right. We need to be seeking unity, not division. Instead of just having elders that are trying to deal with all that and a bunch of babes. We don't want a bunch of babes in a congregation. We do in the sense of so we have an opportunity for them to develop into strong spiritual families, but ultimately we need all of the above. As you think about a congregation's landscape of members, so to speak, shouldn't there really be some members in all of those levels? You should have some that have reached that point where they're put in as elders in a congregation. Leadership's extremely important in a congregation. You should have good, strong, spiritual, mature families that are members and individuals that are members. But then you should also have members that are newer and that are developing. And you should have babes that have just started. You know why? Because a good, active, growing congregation is going to have all of those. If you only have core members and you have no new developing people, well, I'll let I'll let Brandon deal with that in the next session, right? Because evangelism needs to be an integral part of what we're doing. We need to constantly have new people coming in. But if the rest of us aren't growing, it's not helping the church. And this is what a good, strong, spiritually mature family brings, is doctrinally strong members that know their Bible, that know right from wrong, that know how to help the elders on these things. They also bring a spiritual mindset and peace. Romans 8, 5 and 6 says, for those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Having peace in a congregation, the impact of that, the positive impact of that cannot be overstated. There have been situations, unfortunately, where there has not been peace, and there's been division, and there's been difficulty, and there's been false teaching, and there's situations like that that exist in congregations, and it's a struggle for leadership. It's a struggle for those that are having to deal with that. And to have peace in a congregation and a spiritual mindset where the members are united and love each other and say, we just want to serve the Lord together, and whatever we need to do, we're here to do that, we're going to help others to grow, that is an amazing thing. And that starts with you and your family. Be that example. Come to church. Be dedicated to it. Say, we're going to bring a spiritual mindset, so we're not going to get caught up in all the stuff that doesn't matter. We're not going to get caught up in the bickering and the division about where we're going to put a water fountain in the building. That doesn't matter. What we're going to do is we're going to show up, and we're going to worship, and we're going to serve, and we're going to fellowship, and we're going to do the things that God has called us to do. We're going to bring peace and stability to the congregation. That's what a spiritually strong family can do. A spiritually strong family can bring vibrant worship and service. Acts 16, 24 and 25. Y'all remember this story of Paul and Silas? They're going about through Philippi, and Paul casts this demon out of this young lady, and ultimately he and Silas are thrown into prison, facing a very, very difficult time. And this passage in verse 25 has always astounded me. It says, having received such a charge, he, the jailer, put them into the inner prison, fastened their feet in the stocks. But at midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. In the midst of a horrible and difficult situation, you know what these two spiritually mature individuals chose to do? They worshiped. They praised God for the great God that He is in good times and in bad. That's what spiritually mature people do. That's what spiritually strong and mature families will do in a congregation as well. They will bring a sincere, authentic, vibrant worship. Now, that's not to say new babes don't bring good worship. That's not my point. But my point is, when you're spiritually mature, you're not carried about with every wind of doctrine like children, right? When you're spiritually mature, you can see through those things and recognize that in good times and in bad, we've got to praise and worship. And so that will always be there in a congregation, no matter what trying times may be going on around you. Ultimately, strong, mature families bring current and future leadership into congregations, and that's incredibly important. Notice 1 Timothy 3, 4, and 5 in the qualities of an elder. It says, one who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with all reverence. For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? And ultimately, as we think about elders being put into place, you know why there's a lot of qualities, I get that, but you know why ultimately elders can be elders? Because they did it in their home first. They did it in their families first. You know how important families are? If we never have spiritually strong families, we never have elders. We never have anyone that can lead the flock of God. Because the first place that you learn to lead is in the home. And so we've got to have families that are focused on these things so that they can bring that leadership capability into the church. And then if you have generational families and kids that are being brought up that way, you have generational leadership potential in congregations. Now, hopefully we get new people in that we're converting that also grow into those roles. But at the very least, we need to be doing our part in our families. Strong spiritual families bring an evangelistic focus, and I'm not going to harp on this, obviously, because Brandon's about to talk about that. But it brings in, if our family purpose is we want to be spiritually minded and evangelistic, we're going to bring that zeal into the congregation as well. Jesus said the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. You can provide more laborers for that effort that he's about to talk about by training your kids and bringing your family up in that way. So why does the church depend upon strong families? We've talked about a lot of reasons. I want to give you some practical applications and some things to think about for how to take your family as it is now, continue to develop it, but also to seek how can I benefit the church through these things. See your church as spiritual family. We've already talked about the importance of that. See them as your brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers. See them as not just the family of God or just the church you go to, but people that you care about, that you love, that are going to have your back and you're going to have theirs. Be present and participate with unity and purpose. We've talked about the importance of dedicating to being there no matter what, but have a purpose in mind for that too. Go into church every Sunday or Wednesday night or every service opportunity, ministry opportunity, fellowship opportunity with the purpose of saying, as a family, how can we impact this positively? What can we bring to the congregation today? Who can we make sure that we go visit with? Who can we invite into our home? Who can we go spend time with? Who can we encourage? Who can we go serve, as Craig talked about? What can our family do today to give to the church? You know, there's phases in all of our lives where we are more takers from the church, and I don't say that in a negative way. That's what we need. We need to grow. We need to learn. We need to take as much spiritual nourishment and encouragement and training as we can. But then there's the time in our life where we've got to flip that. And we've got to now be the givers, the one that pour into others, the one that share those things. And so go into those church activities with that purpose. Use your home as a center for ministry. You know, in Acts chapter 16, we remember the story of Lydia. She was converted in Philippi. And you remember what she did with her household immediately with her house? She essentially made it a base of operations for the work there in Philippi. Like immediately, she opened up her home and said, let's do this. And the apostles there, Paul and the other disciples, they used her home as a base there at Philippi. What an amazing use of a home that she shows us. We also have Romans 16 that talks about Priscilla and Aquila and mentions the church that is in their house. You know, we are so used to, in this day and age, having a church building, a place that we go to, right, and assemble as a church. Most of what they did in the first century was assemble in homes. They had church members, strong spiritual families, that literally their home was where the church gathered together. We may not need to do that for congregational assemblies, but we should be doing that for hospitality and for fellowship and other opportunities. So use your home for those things. Take on family ministries and serve together. So we already heard a lot of great opportunities and examples about service and how to serve others. Do that as a family. Take your kids along. When you're going to visit the shut-in, or you're going to visit somebody at the hospital, or bring somebody food, or go mow somebody's lawn, have your kids with you. Have your spouse with you. Do it as a family and make it a family ministry. Because ultimately it's not, as has been stated, about you. It's about others, but it's also about your family and about training and about helping them to understand the importance of those things. Connect your kids through family-to-family relationships. So make sure that as you think about who your children are interacting with and who their friends are, that you prioritize church. That will benefit the other children, hopefully, in the church. It will benefit your children to have good Christian friends that they're able to spend time with. So use that family-to-family relationship and build those connections for your children. That's very, very important. Offer practical support to church leadership. Go to your elders and say, what do you need help with? We're here, we want to help. Not saying we're perfect. We're not. None of us are. By the way, spoiler alert, nobody's perfect and no family is. But we're all trying, and we're all doing our best. And if we're doing our best, we can go to the elders and say, hey, anything I can help with, let me know. I want to help. And the elders and the deacons will appreciate that very much. Find balance in your time between family and church. This is one of those areas that it gets a little bit interesting sometimes, trying to find that proper balance. Sometimes we view it like there's time with my family and there's time with church. And those are two different things. And I want you to know this afternoon that those should not be two different things. Number one, because if you and your family are all members of the church, you are the church always, no matter where you are. And even if you're only with your blood family, you're still the church, and you should still be acting like the church. But I understand what we mean when we say that. When we go to dinner as a family, when we go do something fun, when we sit down and we watch a movie as a family, when we go on vacation as a family, there's things we do as a blood family for entertainment and fun and to spend time together, and all those things are wonderful, and I'm not saying they're not. But I'm saying at the end of the story, if we view it like two different things, we've got our church life over here and our family life over there. That's a dangerous precedent to be setting in your home. It's a dangerous thing to be teaching your kids, because then you're teaching that you have to pick one or the other. And in reality, our family life and our church life is one and the same. And we should incorporate our family into the things of the church, into the service of the church, into the worship of the church, into everything as a church body that we're doing, because ultimately, and more importantly than your kids or your spouse being a part of your blood family, is that they are a part of Christ's spiritual family. And facilitating that as the end-all, be-all of family is incredibly important. And so take the time to spend some time with your kids and do the fun things and go on the vacation. I recommend that. But don't do that to the detriment of the church. And make sure that you're involving them in the things of the church and you're doing all of those things together. That's how you find balance, is spend time with your family doing the most important things. And then finally, make kids the reason, not the excuse. I've been at too many places where congregations having a gospel meeting, or they're having a big work, they're having a lot of things, and you've got people in the crowd that are going, well, we just can't stay for that because we got to get the kids in bed by 7:30. I get it. Sometimes kids need schedule and routine and all of that, but it probably is not going to kill their long-term development to take a few days and say we're going to push their bedtime back an hour so we can participate with the church. I'm just being honest. It's probably not going to hurt them long-term. So be there and be a part and be dedicated to it. Don't make your kids the excuse as to why you can't participate. Make them the reason you do. And say it's for them that we are going to be there. Third and finally, we want to talk about the role of strong families in mentoring others. How do we develop other people to be good, strong families as well? Jordan, my time never got zeroed out. Do you know where I'm at? 6-7 minutes left? Okay, there was almost an opportunity for a 6-7 moment there. I didn't take it. All right, so we're going to go through this pretty quick. But deliberate spiritual reproduction. Ultimately, what we want is to be able to then take what God has blessed us with in a family and the efforts that we've been able to put in and that God has helped us to develop into a strong, mature family. And when I say a strong, mature family, recognize what I mean. There's no perfect families, okay? None of us are. And so you may be sitting there and go, well, how do I know if I'm a spiritually mature family? How do I know if we can then try to help somebody else? And number one, go visit with your leadership at your congregation and say, are you comfortable, right, with using us for some of these things to try to help mentoring? That's a good gauge. And if your elders go, yes, please, we want you to help mentor some of the younger ones, then take that opportunity and be willing to do that. If they go, hey, maybe we need to have a conversation about that before you do that, then submit to your elders and have the conversation and work on what needs to be worked on, okay? But obviously what we want is to be able to take our family and then help others. This 2 Timothy 2 verse 2 has been mentioned several times, so I'm not going to reread that, but we want this cycle of reproduction to take place. Not just teaching doctrine, but sharing life experience and wisdom. Think about Titus chapter 2, talking about older women teaching younger women. It wasn't just about teaching Bible and Bible verses. Those things obviously are the most important things, and David talked about that. But it's life, and it's how to interact with your spouse and your kids and manage a household, and all of those things are brought into that instruction in Titus chapter 2. And as we're seeking to mentor younger families or newer families in the church, we need to have them in our home. We need to be participating in these life things with them to teach them not just here's what John 3:16 says and here's this verse and all of that is important, but also to go, here's how you make financial decisions that honor God. Here's how you make decisions about balancing time and time management to honor God. Here's how you do some of those things. And it's been mentioned that sometimes those mentoring relationships, they can happen in a variety of ways. Sometimes you can reach out and try to adopt a family and seek to mentor them. Sometimes they're going to ask you, hey, how do y'all do that? And you spend some time with them. Sometimes the leadership may assign you. That happens in congregations as well, and we do that at home. If we've got a new family that comes in, and it may be an elder's family to start, it may be a strong teacher, a deacon, or somebody that's family that starts, but the elders may assign a family and say, would you take them and mentor them and help work with them as they begin to integrate into the congregation? And they would tell that new family as well, we're asking them to kind of take you under their wing and help with that, and that can help. And so those mentoring opportunities for families are there. We want to develop real and authentic relationships with others. Again, that concept of we're family, and so we need to be real. Romans 12:9 and 10 was read. Let love be without hypocrisy, abhor what is evil, and cling to what is good. So as you think about mentoring younger or newer families to try to help develop them, I want you to remember a couple of things. First of all, don't fake it. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't try to say, I'm going to help you with something that you yourself have not conquered. We have to be real with ourselves and understand those things, and also be true and real with them and say, if there is something that's wrong, that's evil, that's not good, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to tell you. And I'm not just going to, for the sake of friendship or for the sake of the relationship, be dishonest with you. I'm going to be honest about what's right and what's wrong. Provide a real example of countercultural Christian living. Be not conformed to this world. New Christians and younger families, they need to be able to see how difficult decisions are made each and every day. How families really, truly navigate the difficult world of temptation and of sin and of struggle. So why is that so important for strong families to mentor others? Just some quick, practical applications. Adopt a family. Invite them into your home. Invite them out to dinner. Invite them to spend some time. And look for opportunities in conversation to see if there's ways that you can help and mentor them in their family life. Offer to teach specific spiritual skills, whether that's how to have a family devotion or family time and how to practically set that up. Maybe a newer convert family just doesn't understand or know really how to go about that. How to disciple your team, how to budget biblically, those sorts of things. Be transparent and authentic and honest with them. Share appropriately, when the relationship is at that point, be willing to share your struggles, your failures. Make sure that they know that this is not some power play, pride thing where you're so much better than them, but that they recognize that we all are simply on a journey of trying to conform ourselves to the image of Christ. And as families, there's things that we may have gone through, struggles that we've had that we can then use to share with them so they may avoid the same pitfalls. Be willing to do that. Practice reverse mentoring. This has been mentioned a couple of times today as well, but recognize that those newer, younger families, they may have experiences and difficulties and things that you can learn from as well. And so make sure it's a shared experience, and it's not just, I'm over here telling you about how exactly to do life because I'm so spiritually mature. If that's our attitude about it, we don't need to be in a mentor relationship. That should not be the perspective and the attitude, but it should be, let's sit down together and let's share life, and let's figure out how we can make our families stronger and better. Involve the entire family in that mentoring process. Allow your kids to be a good influence on other kids in those families as well, and teach them in real terms, your children, how to then recognize good and bad things to do, to say, to act, and that they can then also help those other kids to do that as well. Make time for gender-specific training. So husbands and fathers, go take that other husband or father, that family that y'all are working with, go take him for some alone time. Go do something together. Go fishing together and talk, whatever it is, but make some time to talk about the things that relate to being a husband and a father in a situation where you can do that more in a private setting. And then the same thing for the wives and mothers as well. That's important. And teach by doing. Same thing you do with your family, bringing your kids along and all your ministry activities and service and all those things. Bring the family that you're working with, invite them along with you. Teach by doing. Say, hey, come with us as we do this thing as a family. In other words, make them a part of your family. And then lastly, be humble and seek unity and spiritual maturity, not personal influence. And I want to encourage you, please, if you're at the point where you're saying, I sincerely want to serve and help others to develop good, strong families, and that's sincerely from your heart where you want to be, then God bless you, that we need people that are doing that. But if your perspective is, I want to be seen as some great spiritual person, and I want my family to be seen as some great spiritual family, and so let's make sure we put ourselves in a position where we're over this other family, then that's the last place you need to be. Okay, and you need to check your heart, and I need to check my heart if that's the attitude and that's the perspective. Remember the warning that Jesus gave in Matthew 15:7-9. He said, hypocrites, well did Isaiah prophesy about you, saying, these people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. It's real easy for us to think that our family's got it all together, and our family has the answers to all things, and that's just not true. God ultimately has those answers. But recognize your failures, and if you're dealing with something, a sin problem that maybe nobody else knows about, don't go pretend to be something that you're not and try to teach others, because that's the worst form of hypocrisy. Just decline and go work on your relationship with God first. It goes back to the speck and the log. Make sure that you take care of the problem that you have first before you go and you try to solve somebody else's issues. Don't try to give others what you don't have yourself. As we close, I know I've gone a little over and I apologize, but as we close, Joshua 24:15 is what we started with. Joshua made this proclamation, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And I want you to know the end of that story if you don't know it. Verse 29 and 31. Listen to what this says. Now it came to pass after these things that Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. Verse 31 said, Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, and who had known all the works of the Lord which he had done for Israel. You know that Israel ultimately was strengthened by the family of Joshua. By Joshua's strong family and saying, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord, that created a stronger kingdom. And in fact, that's what we see, is that ultimately strong families create strong kingdoms. And the same thing is true in the church. The more strong families that we have represented in our congregations, the stronger our congregations will be. And that's the ultimate goal. So is your family fulfilling its role? Are you fulfilling your role within the family and building your family God's way? Is your family contributing to the ministry, the spiritual maturity, and the unity of the church? And what younger family are you investing in? Who are you seeking to help grow? Is your family a kingdom-focused family? May God bless you.